So that
So this
obviously is a
property at 404?
need for you guys will be involved in probably some, a lot of those sessions where maybe not so much sharing hours or whatever. The other is a motion, so.
All right, well, we'll take it a step at a time. Thank you.
We'll call the meeting of the Marathon County Human Resources Finance and Property Committee to order. He is late. He will be late. So we have a quorum. Public comment period. Mark, do you want to come up front? If you want to grab this microphone. Mark Comas from Spencer.
And
Mark was here at the last meeting and misunderstood our process, so he talked to me afterward, and he's here today to talk about one of the agenda items. So,
okay, so just
Go
say
ahead.
my story, I guess, so you guys know kind of what's going on.
yes.
Okay. My name is Mark Comas. I'm residing at 404 West Main, which I found out recently is the Marathon County's property. It's a very long story. I was divorced. The wife couldn't make the payment, so I bought the house. That was around 2005, and I'm going to be vague. 2007, I had a motorcycle accident. I used my head without a helmet on. It took till 2014 or so. I got SSI, and I do believe sometime around 2009 or 12, they contacted me saying I had back taxes. The issue and with that is that I remember a meeting. I don't remember if I got any letters. I most likely did, but I don't remember it. And I'd like to maybe purchase the property back somehow. So if everybody give me some time to figure out if I can, I would like that. I'm still there. We've been there ever since until this last spring. We had a notice to leave the house that, like I said, it's real hard for me to go through. The best way I can explain, like I said, John, is that my days are like kind of like Groundhog Days. Every 2 or 3 days, I remember what happened. Otherwise, I had to relearn pretty much everything. I walked, it looked like I'm not doing bad, but days are really hard. And I'll ask that if people listen to what I have to say. I'd like to get more information to maybe John and let you know more details and see if you're short on time. I would like to have a hold on having bids out there and let me have an option to possibly buy back the place where I've been for, it's going on 20 years, I do believe, or 22 years. So we'll keep it short, and I will get information back to everybody. And he's been very nice, so I appreciate the time.
We'll talk about the specifics on that later in the agenda. Any other public comments? Any other public comments? If not, we will move on to approval of the minutes. Actually, Supervisor McEwen has a funeral, so he's excused, so I'm not late. So we have the minutes from the August 24th meeting.
Two comments, please mute your phone, otherwise I will mute you. I have people that have phone numbers that are open. I need those to be muted. And secondly, I apologize to Supervisor Aristad. She should be on the minutes and she should be on the agenda, but we are glad that you're here today. So I will revise that one small item.
So officially, you're welcome to the committee, even though you've been here. So with that technical changes, what are your wishes?
Mr. Chairman, the minutes are not in the packet.
I'm sorry, they were in the updated packet. I had problems updating it, so it just was there. I can send,
Was that just updated, Kristen?
yeah.
In light of that, in order to give the committee members a chance to review them, we will defer approval of the minutes until the next meeting.
And I will make the correction then for the supervisor list.
November.
Okay, so we will defer the approval of the minutes to the next meeting. Educational presentations, outcome monitoring reports.
Is that?
Excuse me, if you could, is somebody looking to make a public comment? If not, if those listening in could please mute their phones. In your packet was a summary that Sarah and I had pulled together based upon the completed surveys and Lance's notes, my notes, and her notes relative to the meetings that we had. The people that made comments electronically were more likely to get their full comments captured in there than the people that came in person, but we are looking for themes that came out of those meetings. And so you'll see they're broken down into broadband, childcare, a number of other categories, and we would ask whether or not you heard anything in addition to what we've captured here in terms of comments. We received letters from the Community Partners Campus. I received a phone call from Dave Ekman from the Chamber of Commerce that are also reflected in here above and beyond what we heard and received in comments. Are we missing anything in those categories, and have we categorized them appropriately? I don't know if you've had a chance to look at them, but we want to make sure that before we start getting into that, the issue of any discussion of criteria and prioritization, that we make sure that we've captured what we have. Understanding that this is going to be an iterative process as people come up with ideas. We'll look at it. I know that on next Monday morning at 9 o'clock, the Wisconsin Counties Association is going to be talking about childcare issues. That may generate additional thoughts. It was raised by Vicki Resich from McDevco, along with a number of other citizens, is a critical need coming out of the pandemic. So we may have additional items that may come out. And I think what we're looking for today in those areas, broadband, childcare, economic recovery, infrastructure, and in others, and we created categories. Are you comfortable with what we've created? Not that doesn't indicate that those are what we're going to fund, but rather it's capturing the concepts of what was presented. We have some people saying send it back to the feds. Some people you said use it for property tax relief. We try to capture the gamut. Supervisor Gibbs.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, even though we've captured some of the comments, the ability to actually do some of the is not, this is not reflective of whether or not it's eligible or not.
Right, that's where our criteria will come in. And again, we didn't want to have somebody coming back, well, I said this and you didn't review it. I think we will then capture the list, subject it to the criteria, and then go about trying to develop that plan. So again, we were looking to be as inclusive, whether they're eligible or not, as possible. So, Supervisor Leahy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will these continued discussions be simply agenda items on future meetings, or will we set aside specific times where we only focus as a committee on talking about these ideas or talking about the criteria?
In an ideal world, we'd probably set aside a meeting to do that. Unfortunately, the ideal world is affected by the budget process. So we'll try to perhaps take our educational meeting, the second meeting of the month, and limit the agenda so that we can have a better discussion of these items. But we are in our crunch time as a committee, so we'll balance it out. We could have a special meeting to talk about that if you're open and interested. I welcome your thoughts. Go ahead.
I realize what you're saying, time is short, but if we could at least, I think, limit one of those agendas, that there's not too much else going on if possible, so that we can devote enough time to this, obviously it's going to be a lengthy discussion that deserves as much of our time as possible.
And what are your thoughts? Do you like the way we've formatted this? And some of the counties have been very transparent. They've put things like this on the website. I think we'd want to be careful in putting things out there to make sure that we were putting eligible activities out there. We might want to say that these appear to be eligible based upon the guidelines. These were suggestions that came in that do not appear to meet the criteria established by the Department of Treasury. We can do that, but are you comfortable with how we've laid it out? I'm seeing consensus. Kurt?
Yeah, I think you do have, you've at least captured, the essence of what was said. I think the challenge becomes, devil's in the details. In other words, there may be something that that could be looked at that would be eligible by one person and not eligible if somebody else looked at it. So I like you, caution whether we put anything out on the website at this point, because the devil's in the details. Do I structure economic support for nonprofits and find a way to fund a nonprofit activity that potentially was non-fundable in a different way? So I agree with you. I think we need to be very careful and very, that these are what we've captured. However, we haven't determined eligibility. If you did it that way, I think you would, if you want to provide the feedback to the taxpayers, you could do it that way rather than trying to discern what's eligible and what's not eligible.
So I think Supervisor Leahy began the discussion, what are the next steps? We'll look at the agenda for the end of the month and see if we have the ability to push off items until October. But again, we're in that budget crunch time, and if we can't, we may come back to you with special dates for a special meeting. Supervisor Fisher.
I do like the idea of getting this on the agenda so we can discuss it. Are we in a substantial rush for this process when we know that this will be iterative over the next several months, as we finally get the additional information from the Treasury Department for what is and what will not be eligible? Knowing that we are in budget crunch season and that will be taking up a significant part of this committee's time.
I'll try to answer that. It's really up to this committee and the county board to decide. One of the reasons why you want to begin that process now, and you certainly won't want to commit $26 million, but it is pandemic relief. There are people and businesses and programs that have been impacted. And right now we've taken the $26 million and we put it into basically a fund that cannot be spent. So I think we're trying to get clarification of what lost revenues means and how we might allocate that. That could have an impact upon the 2022 budget. So it pays to be prudent and deliberate, but it also pays to be thoughtful and trying to get something put together in time so it can materially affect what we do in response to the pandemic and in the 2022 budget. So you've got balancing, don't rush, but don't delay. And how do we balance that? So I think it would be worthwhile for us to do it. I think we want to begin the process of saying, if broadband's important, what might we do in broadband? If lost revenue is important, how might we look at that? There's been a discussion about behavioral health services at North Central Healthcare. How might we look at that? Some of those items that we might want to set in motion so we've got them in place in 2022. Kurt, I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
I think you're right. What I've seen other counties, some of the other counties have done is they've set aside a portion of the ARP funds for a topic. For example, one county set aside $2.5 million for broadband expansion. Then they decided how they were going to utilize that broadband, or how they were going to utilize that 2.5 million in broadband expansion. So, I mean, there's multiple approaches, and we just have to determine which approach and then set the criteria for those funds as we use them in each of those various areas.
So I will work with Lance and with Christie relative to our upcoming agenda items and seeing if we have the luxury of dedicating our informational meeting to that. Otherwise, we'll look at a special meeting. But I think we need to make that decision in the next 2 weeks. So we'll let you know at the next meeting. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts? If not, we will move on to,
Just one other thing, Mr. Chairman.
go ahead.
I think you're spot on in the fact that we need to somehow develop and provide some clarity as to what portion, because I think the portion of the funds that are eligible under lost revenue provide more flexibility than the defined areas that they have set out. So I think one of my primary concerns are, what is that number? And so there is a question and a challenge that we need to provide some clarity to, that we're looking into as far as the lost revenue and how is it allocated from other entities that we are in partnership with, such as North Central Healthcare. But I think that that's one of the first things that we have to determine, because that gives us a lot more flexibility than the defined brackets that that Treasury has or the statute has put it on.
Any other thoughts, comments on next steps, process? And again, I think if we do that dedicated meeting, we'll invite the county board to that meeting just for transparency and make sure that they're aware of where we're heading. All right. Up next is the Family First Prevention Services Act Social Security Service update on evidence-based program. So Lance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I believe Vicki is on. But just to tee this up, this is, again, you may recall that the county board approved additional positions as part of its previous work in the area of social services, specifically family support specialists, as we move to implement the Family First Prevention Services Act, the federal act that really challenges all social workers to work to develop mechanisms to keep more children in the home safely and to return them to a safe family home as promptly as possible. So the way that Marathon County, one of the tools that we were using to do that were these family support specialists, and this committee asked for an update on those new positions and their effectiveness, and we're here doing that at this time. So Vicki, with that, please take it away. And you should have some information in your packet.
And it's on the screen.
Yes, thank you.
And Vicki, I have it up on the
Yes.
screen, so if you tell me next, I will click the next page for you.
All right.
All right.
I want to introduce myself again, Vicki Tilka. I'm the Director of Social Services. And with us today is also Krista Jensen, who's our Child Welfare Manager, and Mike Nelson, who's our Child Protective Services Supervisor. And they're going to assist with the presentation. I'm just going to give the overview on the very first slide. So go ahead, Christy. Okay, so this is what we really need to do. Lance teed this up nicely, is we need to serve more children that we're legally responsible for and keeping them intact, meaning with their families in their own homes and have less out-of-home care days specifically. Federal funding is going to be redirected to reimburse less out-of-home care and more prevention. So at some point in the near future, we will literally have less federal dollars to be able to support our budget. So it's very important for us to get ahead of that and figure out how we can serve more kids with their families. So in terms of looking at things that we want to do and that already are in process is working with our community agencies who contract with us and provide more in-home safety services, as well as to increase our informal and relative support. So for those family members who are kinship care, which would mean that they're not legally responsible to care for the child, but that they could provide some cares and to be able to support for them rather than have children be in out-of-home care. And then also we know internally we need to look at how we practice in the area of social work, and we're doing a lot of work on how we engage families, how we work with them in order to gain their cooperation and full support and helping them meet their goals. Those are all strategies to help us be more successful. The last piece that we'll be talking about some point in 2022 is likely going to be around engaging our partners. So this isn't just about the child welfare agency, it's about the courts, boards, schools, law enforcement, our medical providers, therapists, everyone who works with families to understand what this major transformation is going to entail. But for right now, our first piece was getting our 2 new positions to move forward to make one of the beginning of the difference that we want to see at our department in terms of providing really intensive care for certain families. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Krista, I believe. So go ahead.
Thank you,
Krista.
Vicki.
There we are.
Yes, thanks for everybody for having us. As Vicki stated, these are, you can see their photos. These are our new family support specialist staff. And so the board had approved those 2 additional positions in September of 2020. So that now turns us over to having 3 family support specialists. So they really work in the home with the parents one-on-one, providing a really great evidence-based program. And so these are those individuals that you see at the bottom of your screen that are providing all of those services for us. You can move to the next slide, please. So as I stated, they are completing the evidence-based parenting education curriculum titled Common Sense Parenting. And we began accepting referrals to this program around February 1st of this year. So far, in our program, we've served 49 different households, which equates to 81 different children. 24 of those families are still engaged with parent education services currently. So 25 families have fully completed the full program. Out of our 3 FSS staff, they each are carrying about 8 to 10 families at a time. And they're usually serving them somewhere around 3.5 months is about how long it takes for the families to get through the curriculum. The curriculum itself really could be completed within a 6-week time period. However, really to put that training in place with the families, to let them practice it, to let our family support specialists observe the families with their children, really utilizing the skills, that takes a little bit more time to make sure that it can be fully implemented in a family. We can kind of work through their specific family dynamics of what might work for them and what we might need to help them come up with new creative ideas around. And so we haven't had to have many families on a wait list or families who are waiting for this service to be provided. In the rare occurrence that we have, they've waited about 2 to 3 weeks for this kind of a service to be offered. Again, that's coming right into their family home, and no family has been turned away from receiving parent education services. If our family support specialists are unable to accommodate them, we have a contract with another provider in the community, and so we will utilize alternative parenting programs for them. In regards to the demographics of the families that we've served, we serve families of all different makeups. It could be grandparents, it could be moms, it can be dads, it can be a combination of a lot of different people. And so we thought it was important to share with you those who we've served so far in our short time of operating this program. We've primarily served mothers. As you can see, there's 74% of the caregivers that we've served. 25% of those are fathers, and 1% is other, so like a grandparent or an aunt or uncle or somebody other who's been caring for the children in their home. You can see on the right the ages of the children that we've been serving, and we have a pretty good mix of all different ages and a pretty close percentage for all of those kiddos. So we don't feel like we're serving just little ones or just kids who are teenagers. We really have a good mix happening here. And you can go on to the next slide. So part of the important thing that we're looking for with our family support specialists is to be able to maintain children in their homes or to be able to get children home faster. We're going to see that families are able to be reunified faster with this program, thus resulting in less funds spent on children in out-of-home care. And so what we see right now when we begin the services is that most of the families that we're serving have been in out-of-home care, or in-home care, excuse me. You can see that 43% have been in-home and 57 have been in out-of-home care. The slide on the right really just breaks down where they're located specifically. And so whether that's they're in relative care or in a foster home, or they might be being served through a different program here at Social Services called TSSF. It really allows us to serve families in their home with some funding, federal funding from the state. So Mike is going to talk a little bit now with us about the outcomes of the program specifically and what we have found following those families who have actually completed the full program, what kind of follow-up we've been doing with them.
All right, thank you, Krista. One thing I'd just like to touch on very quickly is I have the privilege of supervising not only the FSS staff, the 3 staff that Vicki or that Krista introduced, but I also serve the ongoing social workers that work with this FS staff and the families that we're referring to. And one of the questions that was posed to the ongoing social workers was, with the push now that we really are making as far as one of our mission statements, one of our real goals within the unit is to establish permanency with children and families. And one of the things that I asked the social workers is, if there's one thing that we could incorporate or give to you as a service that would help with permanency and get these kids home a little bit quicker, or the kids that are in home that you're working with, to keep those kids placed with their parents or guardians so we wouldn't have the cost of out-of-home care and keep these kids in the home where they deserve. What resonated as an answer was more parent educators within the home that are working intensely with these families through an evidence-based program. And that's what we did. And I can say the 2 staff that we have hired really have done a great job in assimilating into their new role here at Social Services. They work well with our longtime educator, Susan Jensen. And I couldn't be happier with the early results that we have received so far through this program. Like we said earlier, we just started taking referrals to this program on February 1st of this past year. So the data that we're looking at is only 6 months out. So it's relatively new, but I can tell you so far early results look very promising. So on the slide, it talks about the 25 families that so far have completed the curriculum. And thus far, 3 of those 25 families have been families that are in home, where the parent educator began the process, and 22 of those families were children were placed outside the home. Something that was measured in looking at the outcomes is looking at these families that we have worked with, looking at outcomes 6 months post-successful completion of the program. So you can see those 4 bullet points, things that we looked at with regards to what success that they had in the program. And of those 25 families that we served, we had 2 new screened in child abuse or child neglect reports of those 25 families that completed the service. Of those 2 reports that came in, we did have 1 family where there was a new substantiation of child abuse and neglect that we had worked with. I can say that particular family was a family that we had thought was a huge success story at the time. It was a family where children had returned home, and shortly after the parent educator stopped working with the family, we had a new allegation come in. So it's unfortunate that it happened, but what resonated to me when talking with the parent when I did a quality assurance call was part of her issue was she was afraid and worried about losing the support of the parent educator. It just resonated to me and spoke to me about how much support that parent educator gave that particular parent. And the end result, what happened was we just probably didn't do a good enough job in that particular case of building up informal supports to help her once her parent educator left. So it's a lesson well learned, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at, is that, through these numbers and through some of these stats, we also learn lessons on how to do the program even better than we are doing now. You can move on to the next slide. So I think what's really important is the previous kind of the slide indicated the 25 families that have successfully completed the service. 3 families are in home at the onset of service, and all those families have remained in home following the closure of the parent education program. Thus, 100% in home families remained in home. What I think is really important to highlight within this slide presentation is the 22 families that had children in out-of-home care at the onset of the service being implemented or being provided to these families. Of those 22 families, 7 households, or a total of 14 kids in total, were able to achieve reunification back with a parent during or within 6 months of service beginning with that parent educator. To put that in dollar amounts, I took those 7 families or the 14 kids that were in out-of-home care, and I did what the county was paying out the last month that those 14 children were in out-of-home care. Just using that data for 1 month, that was $26,427 in out-of-home care costs that the county did not pay out that particular next month because they were returned back to the home. And I can say through quality assurance calls that the parent educator's involvement prior to the children returning home and once the children return home was very important and a key component with regards to the success of that family and that child reunifying with their parents. As you can see in the bottom, 68% of the kids remain out of home care at 6 months of program completion. But as I said, this is only 6-month data, and there's some lessons too that we're learning from that with regards to different things that we can do within the program to make our numbers even better. Next slide, please. So the feedback, this last slide is the feedback that was given to me from the FSS staff and talking with the families they work with, talking with the social workers, and myself doing quality assurance calls where I reached out to the majority. I try to reach out to every family we worked with through this FSS program. Did not unfortunately hear back from every family that we have served. The feedback that we have received from these parents and these families that we've worked with, as you can see, the parents feel that the FSS workers are actively engaged and the staff have a strong knowledge base. They feel that the curriculum that they're using, this common sense curriculum, is easy to understand and is realistic in utilization with the children that are being involved in the program. Parents value the amount of time they are spending with the parent educators in their home environment. Pre and post tests that we're doing with the parents, they express increased confidence in their ability to parent as a result of this program. And as I said, social workers express their support that they receive from the SFS staff and the positive impacts that it's had not only on their workload, but the families that they're working with, and they see it as a benefit service to the children and families that they're working with. So I guess in closing, before we get to questions, I truly believe that this is a program that is a benefit to Marathon County and the children and families we are serving. Like I said, this has only been 6 months. Just talking seriously and talking with these families and the phone calls I've made, just the appreciation and just the pure honesty that I truly am getting from them. I heard 0 negative comments from the families that I've worked with, that I've spoken with in regards to the curriculum, in regards to the FSS staff that they have. They just find this program to be very beneficial, and they have found it to be integral in with regards to getting their children home and keeping them in the house. So I thank you for giving us the opportunity for these 2 positions to be as a service to the families we're working with Marathon County. And I truly believe that the numbers are going to continue to exceed even what we have presented to you today.
So thank you, Vicki and Christy, and first of all, this was here because when we approved this last year, we wanted an update. Many times we create positions as part of grants, and we never know if they're effective. And given the potential for impacts on our budget for those out-of-home placements, we requested the update. And thank you very much. It sounds like it's more than paying for itself, based upon that $26,000 monthly savings. And I want to thank you for, you all for your efforts on this. And are there any questions from the committee? Kurt?
I guess the one question, is seeing that the success that we have had, is there been any thought given to expanding the program and changing the program and approach that we have been using in other cases?
I can take that question, Chair Gibbs. At this point, we are not looking to expand. We really need to get more experience with our current staff, and looking at, again, just really kind of expanding within what they're doing and getting some more longevity with those positions before we decide if we would like to increase positions. But that is certainly something we would consider as we move forward.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much. I think this might be a value to take to both Health and Human Services and the full board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to Dbn Range Adjustments. Molly?
Sure. So a little background here. These requests originated as reclass requests into my department, and based on the nature of these requests and there not being any substantial changes in the job duties and responsibilities, it did not fall into the reclass category in my mind. However, due to response in market conditions, we felt like there's something does in fact need to be done with the way that we are compensating these individuals. So there is both the captains and the maintenance. So there's with me here. So what you see on the screen in front of you is our existing range for these captains. Their hourly wage is $31.59 through $45.55. You see the comparable counties here along with the average in yellow. And then what I am recommending be the new wage range in green, just shy of the average starting at 35 going through 48.50. And that would be to compensate these individuals more in line with where other counties are. The same is true, Christy, if you're to scroll down, you can see this information for the maintenance supervisor. You can see in red where Marathon County's pay range currently is. Blue are additional counties, and yellow is average, and green is what I'm recommending to be the proposed new range. So again, not necessarily a reclassification of these job titles or working titles, however, just a change in the DBM wage range for these individual titles.
So Molly and I had a conversation before the meeting, and I think what we're seeing is the pressure of a competitive workforce in how it's impacting us. And these were on for educational items. I think we'll be bringing them back for action at a future meeting and agendize for that. But my concern is dealing with this incrementally is going to be a headache. We had a similar discussion earlier today at the Wausau Water Works Commission meeting for the Wausau Water Utilities, where they want to bring in certain people. And it's a systemic problem, and I think we need to look at where we're going as a county in terms of addressing that. Lance?
Sure. Thank you, John, and I think you hit on two things that Molly and I wanted to make clear to the committee. One, in terms of process, we agree that there needs to be a longer-term side of this, and that's the second piece is a comprehensive solution. We are going to be presenting a budget to you in October, November, that is going to provide for a compensation study to look holistically at the entire county and present to you the sort of information that Molly has presented to you here discreetly as it relates to a couple of positions within Marathon County. So in terms of process, it's on for education today, but we need to take action with respect to these issues. These are not, these are important positions within the county, as all of our staff are, but these are significant deviations from where we need to be to compete. So we'll have that on your HR, finance, and property agenda, hopefully, provided the chair supports this, at your next meeting later this month. That will allow us to continue with the proposed effective date on the agenda of October, because we can get it in front of the county board, which is generally the process we've used with reclassifications. And I say generally because our process is not overly clear. We've had reclassifications that have gone, as Molly said, this doesn't meet the definition of what a reclass has been historically. That said, it kind of looks and feels like one. At the same time, we've had reclassifications that have gone to the full board and some that have not. So we're gonna have to work on clarifying that. But in any event, it's our judgment, it's my judgment that we need to take action on these, because this is, as Chair Robinson pointed out, this is a difficult labor market in which to compete. And quite frankly, we will not be able to do that in a sustainable way long-term without addressing these. At the same time, we need to take that holistic approach, that comprehensive approach, which our budget will at least envision doing in terms of funding that study in 2022.
So are there any questions or comments? Kurt?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think the administrator hit on the problem that I'm seeing, and that is, we've identified two areas and two particular two positions where we have, our pay range is below not only the average, but below some of our neighboring, or some of our, what we would normally classify as our comp counties. But I guess the question that I have is, it's got to, our pay range and pay problems have to be bigger than this, just two individuals. I think it's significant throughout. And so how do we begin to address that? And what is the total cost of the adjustment going to be when we do that? I mean, we all understand the challenges that levy limits have imposed, and we can pick and choose in certain ones. But I think the bigger question becomes, how do we become sustainable for all of the positions that are needed in the county? And it's a rhetorical question. I don't know that we have the answer to it, but I thank the administrator for looking at potentially a total class comp study for all employees.
Any other questions or comments? So look for this to be on a future agenda item for approval. Will this need to go to the full board then as well?
The
Or is it within the
last
committee?
time a DBM market adjustment was made, it did not go to the full board.
So I would ask that we research that to make sure where the committee's jurisdiction begins and ends relative to those, so we've got clarity going forward on these. So Mike, I'd look to you.
Mr. Chairman, I think if it's coming out of the current budget and it's budgeted in the department for the budget, I don't think it would necessarily have to go to the full board. But I think if we're going to do a budget transfer and or the future impact would have to be.
And I would just indicate, I did review the rules, our rules earlier today on this topic. As Administrator Leonard indicated, they're not very clear. They don't really describe a process, but I would support what Chair Gibbs identified as a potential move forward and a process that seems to be consistent with the spirit of our rules, if not the language.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, if not, we will move on to budget update. Christie?
I put this on in case there was any updates. Currently, there is not, as Chairman Gibb had said earlier. We did meet the filing requirement for our ARPA on lost revenue, but we are trying to determine whether or not some of our discretely presented component units would be included, and therefore we're going to be meeting again with them and their independent auditors in the near future, I believe later this month, to get back to you. So there's really no other additional updates.
All right. Any questions? If not, we'll move on to 5A1, tax deed bid opening approval or action on a parcel. Do we have any bids? So I had asked, Kim and I and Mike and Connie have had a number of discussions relative to properties. And Mark Comus' request relative to the 404 Main Street in Spencer is on more for informational purposes today than action. Mike, you want to give us a quick overview of it from the county's perspective, legal?
I do have somebody that is on a phone call that please put your phone on mute, ends in 56.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. In regards to this particular property, this is a property that was actually taken by tax deed by the county in 2013, in September of 2013. So it has been county property since that time. My understanding and from listening to Mr. Comus earlier this afternoon, he still resides at the residence. He does not have a lease with the county. He did not enter into a lease. Looking at our rules regarding the sale of tax delinquent land, at this point, the preference to a former owner for repurchasing a property, that preference expires under our ordinance 60 days after the date that this committee approves acquisition by tax deed. So that preference would have expired back in 2013. And we do have an appraisal on the property. I think that appraisal is in the packet. That appraisal was just done. There is a garage on the property as well that burnt down, I believe, in April. We weren't made aware of that until June. That is currently still in I guess I would call it a still burnt down state. It has not been addressed or repaired. So there's not only the property in a concerning state, but also the fact that it's been outstanding since 2013. So at this point, in order to move forward with having bidding occur, we would need the committee to set a price or looking at the appraisal numbers and potentially setting a price for bidding. But as I said, our rules indicate that there is no extension of the preference for a former owner to repurchase over 60 days from the date that the property was taken by tax deed. So I don't know if there are any other specific questions.
So we need to set a price?
I believe we would at this point.
So our back taxes are 24.6, if memory, 24 some.
24,265 and 59 cents.
And that's based upon the taxes that had accumulated up through 2013 with no payments since the counties took title to the property.
That's correct.
So Mark had contacted me after the last meeting and sort of triggered a series of events with Mike working with Connie and Kim. You've done the appraisal. You've also got estimated cost for removing the garage.
discussion with Craig Christians in Facilities, he estimates that the minimum cost to remove the garage is $15,000.
Go ahead. Supervisor Gibbs?
Wouldn't the value of the property change with the garage removed, though? I think you're looking at an appraisal right now. The appraised value of the property is at 35, and that's as-is condition. I don't believe there's anything that stipulates that the garage has to be removed to generate the 35,000 valuation, is it?
I believe the appraisal stated the garage was at a 0 value. So I believe the appraiser took into account the garage. I don't know if he took into account the garage not being there, but he didn't assign any value to that part of the property.
So you don't know if the value would increase if the garage were gone or not? So the issue, and Mr. Gomes and I have talked about whether if he could put a proposal in to basically a bid to buy it back. The question is, what would we set the price at? Go ahead.
This is Administrator Leonard, and I'm looking at the packet on page 35, I believe, in the additional comments section, under the heading Items Considered in Value. Cost to remove the garage is listed within that area, to Chair Gibbs' point.
So the comparables were all above $40,000. So I'm not sure what he factored in setting that appraised value for the demolition. So do we want to, Comos is on SSI. I did reach out to North Central Community Action Program with one of their programs. I'm waiting a call back to see if there's any assistance that they could provide to him. But we have a situation where the county's owned the property since 2013. We've not had a lease agreement. We don't have any insurance, which would be a requirement. So when there's property damage, it falls on us to have that. We have a hardship situation, but typically we're not in the landlord business. We have in the past where we've had extenuating circumstances entered into the lease. I think he's faced now with the potential for eviction now that the eviction moratorium is there. And one of the options would be, again, for him to buy the property back for a price to be set by the committee. Any discussion? Kurt.
So the question that I have is this. I mean, what, if we were to set the price and we go out for bid and the individual bids but is not the highest bidder, what opportunity, if any, does this committee or discretion does this committee have? Or does it not have any discretion over the award of that bid at the time? So I refer to the Corp Counsel for the answer.
Sure. So our code section 3.20 talks about what the rules would be as they apply in this particular circumstance. We would, of course, be looking to set the price first at this committee level. If there are multiple bids received, we would be looking to see first, are they at or above the level that we've set the price at? Our code indicates that we may accept the bid most advantageous to the county, as long as it's in accordance with our other guidelines. And our guidelines are to consider the dollar amounts of the various bids, the future use to which property would be put, whether by accepting one bid, the property would be subject to real estate taxes, and to consider what the best method of proceeding would be to protect public health, safety, recreation, and welfare of citizens and visitors to the county. So in short, the answer to your question is there is some flexibility built into the code. It would be, there would be some discretion depending on the amounts of the bids that we would receive.
So I understand the long and short of your answer is we do have a little bit of latitude, but at the same token, we do have a responsibility to the taxpayers in the county, and if the variance is too great, we may be very hard pressed to award the sale to the former owner if the deviation is too great.
I think that's a fair statement.
So Kim had been working with the village and still has not heard. They have the right of first refusal, and while they're inclined not to take it, they have not weighed in formally. So our options would be to wait for that formal notification from the village of Spencer as to whether or not they want the property, and then set the value, or we could do one of two things. We could wait for that, or subject to their not being interested, set a value for the property. And the question then becomes one of what was the calculation that went into the appraisal. There is damage to the property internally to some of the walls by virtue of the photos that we've seen with the plaster coming out. What value would we set, or do we want to give Mr. Comas additional time to put together his proposal, or do we want to act on this now? So I'm looking to the committee. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. I guess one of the questions I would have, just for clarification's sake, is at the beginning of this discussion, it said that the fire happened after the appraisal. If it happened before the appraisal, okay. So the 35,000 for the appraisal price would have been, in my opinion, net inclusive of the cost of removal of the fire damage section. Okay, and then just also confirming, looking at 24,265 in back taxes through 2013, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing that would be added on to that now would be the additional 425 that was cost for the appraisal itself. I'll make a motion that we set the appraised value of 35,000 on the property as the price.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. So, Mark, what you'll have to do is put together a proposal that would meet or exceed that in a competitive process. You can continue to work with you, and if I learn things, I'll let you know. Go ahead, Kurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the things that, is evident is one, we need to work with Spencer. We need to work with the individual here in this case. If there is no bids exceeding the 35,000, which is historically what we have always set was the appraised value on property that the county's owned, that we can lower that price after bids have been taken if we have no successful bids on that. And taking into consideration the reason, the two reasons that I set the asking price at 35. One is the appraised value historically that we've always used, and second off, We have not, Marathon County has not received property taxes on that property since 2013. And so the county is technically out that money. With the 24,265 plus the 425, you're really at 25,000 almost, and then back taxes for 5 years. So setting it at 35 is I think, still a fair price.
All right. What timeline, Kim, would we have? Or,
The Village of Spencer is formally meeting on September 18th, and the clerk said that is when they will vote on whether or not they are interested in the property. His preliminary indication was that they are not, but they have to formally vote on that.
all right, thank you. Next, we'll go on to 234495 Fire Station Road, Town of Wausau. Kim?
This property is a little bit similar. It was originally taken by tax deed in 2013. The current tenant there had a lease for a couple months. He has not renewed his lease or paid anything since June. The Corp Council directed me to restart our process with the tax deed as far as notifying county departments and notifying the municipality, which is the town of Wausau, to see if they were interested in the property. The town of Wausau did indicate to me via a letter dated August 30th that they are interested in purchasing the property in accordance with our code preference to the municipality for right of first refusal.
Have those discussions included the price?
No, that is something that the committee needs to do is to set the price. I got the appraisal, I think Christy got it into the packet about 30 minutes before the start of the meeting. The appraisal came in at $16,000. The payoff figure for November 2013 was $7,398.30. So those are the two figures. I believe the ordinance states that when it comes to setting purchase price for municipalities, we have to go with the lesser amount of the appraisal or the back taxes.
That's correct.
Payoff figure for November 2013 is $7,398.30.
Mayor Gibbs?
Does that include the most recent appraisal? And if not, can we add that to the 73,9830 in the recovery if the municipality chooses to exercise that?
That tax amount is from 2013, so it does not include the appraisal price, which was $400.
So what are the wishes? So we've got basically 74,000 of back taxes and $400 appraisal. 7,400, I'm sorry, 73,9830 plus 400. What are your wishes?
I make a motion that we set the purchase price, or set the sale price at 15,000, and if the municipality chooses to exercise, we be consistent with what our ordinance says for municipality purchase. Oh, the appraisal 16? 16,000 then, excuse me, 16,000.
All right. So is there a second?
And yes, I'll second that motion in order to expedite the return.
Any other discussion?
Chair Robinson, if I could, I'm not sure that we can set a price based on the appraisal and then a contingent price for the municipality. Our code indicates that we can agree to sell tax delinquent property to a municipality under the following terms: at the appraised value or at the value of any unpaid taxes, assessments, charges, and levies, whichever is less. So I think we would need to set the lesser amount as the amount that we would agree to sell to the municipality, and then perhaps the committee would direct the clerk to engage in the municipality further with that amount in mind.
Another option would be to sell it consistent with our code.
That would be consistent as well.
I would make clarity on my motion. The motion is to set it then at 16,000 and not have, and sell it, if it gets sold consistent with our ordinance.
So would that motion be to establish an appraised value of 16,000, however, to sell it consistent with our code?
I'm interpreting it as that.
Okay. Are you capturing it as that? All right, is the second comfortable with that language? No. So it has the appraisal in to dispose of the property consistent with our code. Would that be the language? I'm looking to avoid.
I think we would be looking to set the appraised value of the property at $16,000 and to sell the property consistent with our code.
Yes. You want to read that one more time?
Updated his motion to establish the appraised price at 16,000 consistent with our code.
No.
Establish the appraised value at 16,000. The motion is to establish the appraised value at 16,000 and direct for the sale in accordance with our code.
Okay, and direct.
Correct.
Yes.
Everybody, that's what I heard Kurt say, right?
Yes.
And somewhere the words were there somehow though.
I'd like to second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Next is the approval of the July claims and question costs, which were sent out last week. Any questions or motions? Moved by Supervisor Leahy, seconded by Supervisor Fisher. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the claims and question costs will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. Jennifer, this is just our basically going back and giving the approval to the checks that have already been issued, but it's part of the process that we need to do for the auditors. So if you have questions as we're going through any of these items, please feel free to ask them. Remember, there's no the worst question is what question that isn't asked. So 2022 budget timeline and preliminary assumptions. Christie?
Again, I just put that on there in case we have any items that we have to talk about, and there is one. The Marathon and Portage County Finance Committees have to meet jointly to approve the airport's budget. We had that scheduled for 5 o'clock on September 28th. Portage County has a conflict with that. There will be a 5 o'clock WebEx meeting on Monday, September 20th, to review the airport budget and then approve it by that committee, and I need a quorum of the total. We will have it at the airport, but it will be on WebEx, and I believe the Portage County had a meeting before that, so they should all be in the same room or hopping on WebEx from wherever they were to start with. So 5 o'clock Monday, September 20th, WebEx to review and approve the airport's budget is part of their bylaws or articles. So, and that budget also reviewed by the county, our county administrator, and I believe we're gonna WebEx in the Portage County Finance Director, maybe their executive as well, just so that they can be in there at that meeting too.
Allison? Supervisor Leahy?
Thank you. So just to clarify, there's nothing scheduled any longer for Tuesday, the 28th? Or is that still a regular?
You would have your regular meeting. It's just the 5 o'clock one would not, won't be at the airport. We believe we'll be in the Employee Resource Department room here. We're just trying to make sure that we can get the WAM to work. And so we'll have it here in the courthouse. You will have your 4 o'clock. We will not be at the airport, and we will not have a 5 o'clock that night.
So that will be hopefully the time when we can talk about ARPA on the 28th. Anything else on that? All right, ARPA fund approval process. Christy?
Yep. So one of the things is that we have a really nice graphic from the meetings, public engagement readings, but the question is where do we go from here? And I'll just scoot down. I added this at the updated packet. So one of the things is, and we've already done our initial reporting. It's called the Intern Reporting, and from there on we do quarterly reporting. But what happens in the ARPA funds is that there are subsections in the Treasury Department website for the portal that we use that break down by category. And so we want to make sure that when we're doing our ARPA funding and our ARPA commitments, we match exactly up to what the Treasury Department's requirements are. So we had looked at several softwares to help us get that done. And this is one of them we looked at was Open Gov. But what it is I thought the PowerPoint would just give you a little run through on what the timeline would be. So it just talks about ARPA funding. We also are going to look at potentially buying and purchasing just software to help us throughout this coordinated effort from the departments requesting to use ARPA funding or committee members through the ranking process and then sending it to the finance committee and the full board. So this just talks about you need to provide a system that departments can submit requests. You need to allow the staff to review and approve ARPA and CIP projects in a single location. And then that would also include then the committees as well. So department heads are asking to submit ARPA requests. We want them to go through a single point, have a review, evaluation, and a scoring ranking based on the criteria that you as a committee and you as a county board develop. And then we need internal and external reporting for ARPA spending. Most importantly, the Treasury portal for reporting our not only our obligations, but the expenditures. And then we need to inform and engage residents to gain feedback on community priorities. So this is one way to do that. Just looking at an overview of how we can do that with one of our softwares we looked at, just Open Gov. You have the planning and budgeting, which is what we're in really right now. Procurement is really the development of those, once you encumber those funds, or I guess the Treasury calls it obligate them. We're going to be looking at purchasing. We need to do reporting, and then it has a front end for the citizen services. And so that kind of just shows you what you're looking at for a full system to try to get it from start to finish. And then it's just kind of to show you if we were to get a workflow together, just kind of how you're going to manage that. So you're going to track it, approve it through whatever county minister will be the gateway, and then it would go up to the finance and the county board in general. And then this just shows you how to manage all of those requests in one place. Yeah, and just another nice graphic just to show you how the funding acts We're right now in the organization and planning phases, hoping to execute and then track and review, which is going to be a big deal. It's taken a lot of man hours. We had successfully received 2.6 million from the routes to recovery, and we are still working on the reporting aspects of that because we use spreadsheets and just a plain general ledger. So when you take 10 times that amount as an award over the course of 3 years, kind of is going to be a longer time period than the short amount of time we had from March to November of last year for routes recovery. Just shows you a little bit of the things that we hope that you could see based on the workflow and also the dashboards to see what we're spending, how we're spending it, maybe in the categories that it's going to be. And then these are just a few.
So Christy, is this here for informational purposes, or do we?
It's here for two things. One, we are looking at the pricing on those is below our threshold for our RFP, so we would be able to do that, to look at those. But the problem is we want to have a workflow and a timeline for you, but we need to put it in place and either build it ourselves or use one of the just out of the box packages. So we're looking at seeing which one of these smaller purchases would be right, hope to obtain it, get it in place, develop our workflow around it, and then request that it be reimbursed by ARPA and also to use it for rollout of the program itself.
So are we specifically committing to the Open Gov?
No, we are, between the city and the county, we've had demos on 2 different softwares, so we're really looking at those 2, but I thought the graphics in this one were especially easy to follow, just to give you a visual on what we need to do.
Okay, did anybody else find that it was a little bit ironic that it said Open Gov, but confidential, do not share? I thought,
I think that was because there was pricing attached that we eliminated, so I think that was the confidential portion of it.
I did notice so do we need to authorize the expenditure of funds for, well, are we looking for a transfer? We don't know the amount because we don't have a proposal that we've agreed to yet.
We have funds in the budget for small capital projects of this nature. The pricing is under, it's under our RFP requirement. So that we can purchase directly and get this going. But if we do want to have ARPA reimburse us for this stuff we're going to track ARPA with, we would then forward that to you. So it's kind of 2 things. One, to give you a look at the schedule and the timing, and then secondly, a purview that if it is something that we do obtain, that we would come to you for a request to reimburse with ARPA.
So it'd be a retroactive approval of use of ARPA funds for a contract that we entered into. Mm-hmm. Supervisor Fisher.
So just for clarification's sake, is this something that we would have basically an access license for approximately the next 4 years?
Yeah, it's a subscription.
Okay, so this would just terminate at essentially the end of the ARPA process itself?
Yes, there are other parts of the application that would have other uses for us, so we can determine whether we want to terminate at the end of ARPA or not. Or if we find it useful, we would then request to be rolled into the operating budget.
Okay, but the initial subscription would be going towards managing, obviously, the main part of the ARPA distributions.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So Chair Gibbs.
Christie, I know that the cost is that cost that's under the CIP requirement limit. Is that for the 4 years during ARPA, or is it per year?
Per year.
Then the other question I would have is this: if we're going to do and request and utilize ARPA funds to reimburse ourselves, do we dare enter a contract without ARPA authorization or without doing it prior to? my suggestion would be that we authorize it from the board moving forward before we try to reimburse ourselves after the fact.
And the other concern that I would have relative to the last comment is that it's actually a $120,000 contract, not a $30,000 contract. So I think we need to run it through the appropriate channels to get it done. Is this a time-sensitive issue?
No, that's why we brought it.
So if we could maybe have that, I think that we're not talking 30,000, less than 30, we're talking slightly less than 120. So if we could bring a resolution transferring it from KIP, and then also authorizing the use of the ARPA funds at a future meeting.
Well, Mr. Chairman, couldn't we utilize ARPA to begin with? That way we don't have to use CIP? I mean, I get the issue about having to, because it's clearly more than 30, because of the 4 years, the total cost is going to be more than 30. So that's one hurdle I think we need to get over. But I think the other thing is, where we currently have the ARPA funds set aside, if we do a budget transfer, which requires 2/3 majority of the board, we can do that directly if we get approval to move forward on it.
So, do we want to take action tonight, or do you want to wait for a resolution to come in to clarify the exact logistics of how we're going to do this?
Well, I think because the total cost is above 30, I don't think we have an RFP issue that has to be issued. And so we need to write the RFP and then submit the RFP before we can have anything to act upon, because we don't know how many responders are going to be responding to that RFP.
This is Administrator Leonard. I was going to say the same thing, and I think also at this point, it's here before you for education. We simply recognize as staff that, the process that this committee laid out in terms of public engagement and setting of criteria and evaluating of projects is going to be a considerable amount of staff time to continue that throughout the 4 years. And at the same time, at least for the first 2 years of that, we're going to be going into the enterprise resource planning implementation stage with our future vendor, which is likewise going to stretch staff. So we're still, from a staff perspective, trying to evaluate the cost benefit, advantages, disadvantages of seeking an outside platform. I think Christy and her staff did a nice job of reaching out and getting a prominent one that many other governments have turned to for this. That said, we're going to need to have some solution for the process you laid out that you want us to go through, which is that citizen engagement, criteria setting, project evaluation, and the reporting that's required, like Christy laid out. We're going to need an answer for how we're going to do that. Whether that's internal or external is still yet to be seen, but this vendor is one that quite a number of municipalities have worked with.
We're already ahead of many communities in terms of citizen engagement with what we've done, so we might want to have that reflected in the RFP.
Yeah, we'll evaluate. We'll come back with additional information for you. We'll evaluate what our next steps are. The other piece that we haven't discussed today, but does relate to the agenda item, is engaging staff and county board committees on potential projects. Quite honestly, we've engaged the public more than we've engaged individual standing committees. There's one standing committee I know has already put forward one proposed project for use of approximately $3.5 million of ARPA funds, but we still have a great deal of opportunity to engage not only staff but standing committees on what those projects suggested projects to kind of go through that same process of evaluation using those criteria that you've previously discussed. We have those opportunities as well.
Other questions? Supervisor Fisher.
I'm fully in support of this process. If this is going to ease the burden of the staff time that's going to be put towards it while maintaining the transparency we want to be providing to the taxpayers, and definitely if we were able to move, basically ARPA funds to it after we go through our process to ensure all the steps are taken care of. But I think this would definitely be helpful to continue that relationship with the taxpayer and keep this open and transparent.
All right. Anything else? If not, we look forward to revisiting this at a future meeting. We'll move on to intergovernmental budget transfers.
There are none at this time.
So we will move on.
Well, there are none except for the next item, which is the highway department. There may or may not be, depending on that. So there are no true budget transfers, but we will be talking about the highway department. So that would potentially be its own item on the agenda.
All right. Resolution amending the 2021 KIP for the Enterprise Resource Planning System. Who's?
I'll have
Kick things off
Molly,
just
yep.
with what you see in front of you in the packet here, this timeline. This is something that you've seen before, and you'll see the start of that is today's meeting. So there's going to be some information shared with you in regard to costing and another information. That material is going to be shared then with the full board, and then the request is that board members review the material and submit questions to me prior to the 9/16 meeting. I'll work with Jerry and Christy to make sure that there is answers to those specific questions prepared for that educational session on the 16th. Leaving that meeting, we'll ask for board consideration and then ultimately voting on 9/21. I also just want to note, as we move on into more specifics in terms of costing, Christy gave a presentation a few meetings back in regard to the benefit, and I just don't want to lose sight of how important this ERP is to drive operational efficiency through streamlined workflow and business process improvements, enhanced reporting, et cetera. I could just go on in regard to the benefit, and so I just want that to be ringing in your mind as we move forward to the cost portion. So with that, I'll pass it over to Christy.
We'll go to the cost portion, and then there is a resolution that's in your packet. This would be the resolution that goes to the county board, as Molly had delineated in the timeline. But we'll talk a little bit about this project is currently in the 2021 CIP plan. Here it is right here. It is in at $1.5 million, which has been funded by CIP funds and the carryover of other softwares that came in under budget. These are the software such as our land record software and law enforcement software. And so what we're requesting is to modify the 2021 CIP. We're going to replace the old number with the new number, and I'll show you that number in just a moment. And then for 2021, it's going to keep this money that was already established in 2021. This was already established in 2021. And the unfunded portion is the $2.5 million, which is our new cost for capital and startup cost. And that is what the resolution is really going to say, is to modify the 2021 CIP because the project itself is in there, and then request that we look at making this a critical project for the 22 CIP. And with that, I'll show you the number. So this is...
Sorry, Tony, I'm multitasking.
I believe you, I know you.
Okay, so this is the county's portion of the ERP system, and I just put into here, I'm gonna make it a little bigger. It includes Workday, which is what we are using as our ERP system software, Collaborative Solutions, which is the consultant that will help us put that software in place. Not only do we use Workday, but there are going to be 3 additional items. Teller will be in there, and Teller is a cash receipting system. Tracker, which is debt investment management, which we are already including in this ERP system, but it is already included as a portion to be purchased currently. It's a small item. And Cartograph, which is, I believe, replacing CFA in the highway department. So those are all the moving parts and pieces of the ERP system. So when you say, well, how did you get the numbers so different? We are buying a very robust ERP system, and it's going to also take a lot of other pieces to it that have been demoed and looked at by our departments to make sure that we're running something that we believe will be helpful to us in the future. With those, the application costs show you the cost in 2021 yet this year, so we do have money for that already currently in our budget. It shows you the amount of money. The biggest amount would be in 2022, which is the amount there. Additional costs would also be additional costs for us to implement any contingency fund. This will show you the total cost. Then there is actually reduction in costs in the future because we already spend, I believe it's $190,000 on our current system, Kayenta, for maintenance. So even though we will be buying a subscription, that will be a higher cost in the future. As you can see here, these are subscription costs. About a third of that, or a little over a third of that, is already being reduced because we are no longer going to be paying for support of our 27-year-old system instead. With that, these are the costs that we're considering the capital cost. It's stated as total operating costs, but for 2021 and 2022, those are really startup costs because we don't have a software that we will be fully implemented and using, and therefore, even though we've really designated those as operating, for those years, they're really startup costs. So the total cost of capital and the subscription fees prior to implementation is the $4,059,000. We already have, again, $1.5 million in funding, and that is where we are looking at the final cost and the balance that is needed for the county to fully implement, and that we would be using these softwares to get the job done for us. Next page is just the total cost of the project. And that would be the county and the city, and the county is going to share their portion, and the city will also be going for a request to do their portion. So the total cost of capital requests and subscription fees prior to implementation is $5.1 million. And those are the costs. And again, remember, we listened to, we had the PowerPoint in regards to the business reason of why to go to a new ERP system. So there were some implicitly described savings because of the effectiveness of not only having less, you can do best practices of purchasing, using purchase bids, non-missed payments, and some other items to help us create more efficiencies throughout the county. And with that, that is how we got to our current resolution, how we got to the amended number and to the current resolution. And with that, I just asked if Molly had any additional items to share on the HR side, because she's now seeing the full effects of how not having a comprehensive employee resource software or any other items to track things. She may have some additional thoughts to share.
Yeah, I'll just share the benefit of having a system like this for enhanced reporting, workflows, getting the information in the right place the first time, service level, customer service, both internal, having, for employees being able to self-serve, being able to update their own addresses, doing things like that is going to save the soft savings on this. Difficult to really quantify at this point, but it's going to be absolutely huge. We spend a lot of time, effort, and energy chasing our tails and looking for information and, looking for places to document things and trying to make the system that we have work, and wishing that we had a system that we don't have in other areas. So again, just to speak to the benefit, it's really, really important to drive the operational efficiency that we need.
All right, are there any questions? So you're asking us to adopt the resolution, and what will go to the county board? How are we rolling this out to the county board? What's the plan?
At the educational meeting, we were planning on doing that business. The PowerPoint that we provided to you, I believe it was the first meeting in August. And then the resolution with the amendment to the CIP and the cost summary, as you have in your packet today.
Mr. Robinson, or Chair Robinson, if I can add just one thing. So if you, Christy and Molly both made reference to that previous meeting where we went through the business case. That was your July 27th, 2021 meeting. So in terms of why is this before you today, and why is it ultimately going before the county board? Twofold. Why in terms of the fact that we need such a system? I just want to be very clear, and it's probably going to come off a little bit blunt, but continuing with the status quo is not an option. Our current system, from a pure financial reporting perspective, is wholly inadequate, and it is entirely non-existent on the HR side. We did put through an RFP process, seek a comprehensive solution to each of those issues, and the evaluation process led us to this place where we have been involved in vendor negotiations for a contract, and as no surprise, the purchase price of this software is significant. They all are. That said, it's something we need to spend money on. So that also leads me to the why is it before you today? It's because we need to, because of this multi-year implementation and cost structure of this plan, we need to have the county board approve the expenditures of the funds, and we're doing that through the CIP, the amendment of the 2021 CIP for the entire cost of the implementation, and that's that $4 million amount, that $4,059,524 that Christy referenced. So why in terms of need is one of the things we want to make very clear to the county board. So our ask of this committee today is not only to move this forward to the county board, but also help us understand what information you and the other board members are going to need to see at that informational presentation to feel comfortable amending the 2021 CIP to allocate and encumber these funds moving forward, because this is, in terms of importance of projects moving forward, I struggle to identify one, at least from an internal operations standpoint, that is more important than this Workday implementation. So what information do we need to make sure we highlight for you at the full board educational meeting to allay those fears? Because I fully appreciate and understand that $4 million is a great deal of funds, and that's the initial implementation. There is that yearly ongoing operational component piece to this as well. So that's the ask of you today, is not only to move this forward, but also help us understand what information we need to bring. You'll recall at the July 27th meeting, you saw a video of some testimonials from individuals from the city and county of Denver about the improved functionality they had as a result of Workday. You'll recall the kind of infographic slides that Christy and Molly had walked through, and you'll recall the information that Jay shared. But we want to make very clear that if we take this forward, move this forward to the county board has all the information they need to make the policy decision to encumber those funds and as part of the amendment to the 2021 CIP.
Supervisor Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think you can pretty much start by saying what you just did. You know, earlier in the meeting, we were talking about salary ranges. You know, another thing that, as an employer, something employees want is to be working within a modern system that works for them and makes their day easier. So I think you could definitely attack this from the fact that we are an employer and we have people working for us who would benefit in their day-to-day from a system like this. That's all part of the attraction and retention of quality employees. I believe you also mentioned at a different meeting that our auditors themselves have recommended a new program. I mean, that's imperative when we're talking about why we're implementing something like this. So talk about some of those outside sources that are also recommending this, if not, you know, demanding it. But yeah, I think if you kind of reiterate what you just said to us, just how important it is for the day-to-day business and making things more efficient, that's really important.
I would also ask that, you know, we had that discussion of the capital cost versus operating cost. I think we're going to need to spell out what, you know, what's included in the 4 million, what's ongoing obligations, how are we capitalizing any of the software agreements going forward? What will this mean incrementally? I think, again, full disclosure, the redundancy of staff in departments to implement it, I think that needs to be explained. So we've got a full disclosure of sort of the transactional or transitional costs associated with implementing this system, and that redundancy in certain functions. So I think it's important that we do that because this will have long-term consequences on the budget, both on the capital and operating side. Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the other thing that we need to be pretty clear on, ever since I've been sitting on Finance Committee, we have struggled to get financial reports, comparisons to actual to budget forever with the current system, and I'm not throwing stones at our department. Christy loves Kayenta and she doesn't want anybody to change, and I understand that. But you know, the reality is we cannot, as supervisors and as a HR Finance Committee, continue to make business decisions for this county and departments, especially with the levy limits moving forward, without having some of these other information and budget to actual comparisons, so that we can actually look at our budget to actual comparison on HR costs. I think one of the other things I think that that is imperative to relay to the full board is the amount of lack of information that's available at the HR department as far as tracking employees, employee training, those type of things that potentially can get us into liability issues that this software will help alleviate. And so I think that's another aspect that we need to show. And if there's any software that we're trying to piece together right now in the HR department and utilize, that this will replace and or update and have an updated as software changes, have that updates each year available to the department rather than having to try to go out and fix something that doesn't work.
I would somewhat facetiously point out in 1970s when I was on the county board for the first time, we had better financial reporting than we do today, and that's a sad commentary. So it's not, again, the finance department, it's the capacity of the system to generate the reports we need to become efficient decision makers. Supervisor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. I think another additional fact that the board would like to hear is a more defined, if possible, figure around the soft dollars that will be saved with this new program. You know, living my world on a day-to-day basis in these types of programs, when you can do something yourself, or when you can do something that it's just you can run a report instead of having to ask other people to do it, the total salary dollars that can be saved, or at least in this case reallocated, because they're not, you know, we're not moving paper around, we're not having 3 people having to do something that 1 person should be able to do themselves. Although that doesn't always have a defined dollar figure right away, you know, a roundabout idea to give to the board that, hey, we do have these extra operating dollars coming that will be impacting the budget. However, this cost will help offset other costs in regards to simple, efficient operations of the county staff. And I was very pleased to see that we were moving forward or looking to move forward with the Workday program. It is a good, solid, robust program for both GLs as well as the HR components. So I think the board would like to hear that.
Just a thought that popped into my mind is whether or not we ought to have Baker Tilly replace the city of Denver in the context of a presentation of what value this brings to the county. I think as our auditor, they see what happens in Wisconsin from a relevance perspective. I would think that John Rader and crew could bring more value added to what this means to us in Wausau, Wisconsin versus what it meant to Denver. Picking up on what Supervisor Leahy had suggested. Any other thoughts? Jennifer, you're new. I'm going to pick on you. What would you like from a new supervisor's perspective to see in a presentation where we're spending $4.5 million on a capital expenditure?
What he said. No, coming from the eye clinic of Wisconsin and going through different EMRs, there's different needs that need to be discussed as far as understanding what the capabilities are. And that's in essence what we're discussing is the capabilities of what this system can do and the value that it brings. Before we ended up selecting the software, we had to determine what the capabilities were. And that is, I feel that that's very important. And it looks like everybody's working towards that goal. So I don't know if that gives you, I agree wholeheartedly that you want people to be able to get their job done as easy as possible. So I agree.
The one item we did not bring up too much, but could be costly, though, is also cybersecurity. It's not only a portion of what's justified in the ARPA, but we have 2 of our IT people here, and we are just recalling how NTC itself had a cyber attack, and I believe Jean and Connie are here, that your department had to assist in some of that, and they are currently implementing Workday, and I believe that on the cyber side of it, your department has looked at it and is interested in the capabilities that Workday has versus what we have at this time. Just as another one, I don't know how to put dollar amount on. I guess it would be in Bitcoin anyway, but it would be something that we also feel is important to have as justification, is just that security and knowing that it's going to be a more secured system. And it is updated because it's a subscription. We are updated with the latest update of the software. We don't have to wait or do it. It comes along with it. So we will always have the latest version of the software available to us.
Any other comments? If not, is there a motion? Supervisor Leahy.
Creating a priority CIP project and providing for a multi-year CIP budget and funding of the project.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Fisher. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Next is the 2021 budget, new positions postponed from the last meeting. Molly?
Yes, so at the last meeting, we discussed abolishing the discussed abolishing the 1.0 FTE maintenance manager within the highway department to create the 1.0 FTE deputy director, in addition to creating a 0.6 FTE accounting specialist. The question was raised where the funding for this position would come from. In order to fund this change in the rest of 2021, the budget impact would be $6,308.63. In the packet, you'll see a breakdown of vacant positions thus far in 2021, totaling a budget surplus here of $43,955.11. So being able to fund that $6,000 needed to create these two new positions, or this 1.6 in 2021, would still leave additional funds of $3,646.48 within the highway budget.
So are there any questions? If not, are there any motions? A motion to approve would be in order. Chair Gibbs?
I'll make a motion to abolish one FTA maintenance manager C44 within the highway department and create a 1.0 FTE deputy director D61 effective 11/1/21 and create a 0.6 FTE accounting specialist B23 within the highway department effective 11/1/2021.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Leahy. Any discussion? Any discussion? Not all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Resolution to approve the 2022 KIP project program. Lance, do you want to lead this, or is Terry's on? We've seen this. This is taking it to the county board and presenting it for budgeting purposes. I'm sorry? We did take action on the social services aquatic therapy pool to turn it into the conference center and the parking lot at the last meeting. But I think what we want to do is make sure that we get the entire plan before the county board for their consideration. It doesn't mean it can't be changed based upon changes in budgets and concerns, but what are your wishes? Chair Gibbs.
The other thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't define which projects are going to actually be funded at this point because it doesn't put funding with them. So I would make a motion to approve the 2022 CIP project plan as spelled out with the projects in them and their estimated current cost, understanding that it is yet to be determined which are going to be funded and how they're going to be funded.
So is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Supervisor Fisher. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, all is in favor of approval, subject to the conditions that were laid out in the motion, will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. All right, initial resolution approving revenue bond financing for Bug Tussle Wireless LLC. Steve or Mitch, are you on?
Yes, I believe we're both on.
Okay. So we have before us the proposal for the initial resolution. Mike had indicated that he had sent this to our bond council. We do not have their draft back. So we will not be taking action tonight. We will be having a special committee meeting between now and probably right before the county board meeting on Thursday's informational meeting to review and approve the resolution. And we've asked that we get it by Tuesday of next week. This will give us a chance to share it with Bug Tussle and with Fond du Lac County. But we've heard the pitch before, and with that, I'll turn it over to Steve and Mitch from Bug Tussle.
I believe I've presented to this committee previously, correct?
You have.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, I don't think there's been really any changes since I presented. We're looking at a middle mile fiber build of approximately 200 miles. We're looking at going directly past 1,180 homes or businesses with that, another 3,478 that are within a realistic distance to add into that. We're looking at doing some additional fixed wireless broadband at 100 megabits per second to provide service until fiber gets out into all of the areas. Perhaps one of the new developments is that we are working with one of the RDOF providers on a very specific project for Marathon County to build that provider's RDOF areas while we're building the middle mile, assuming this would move forward, which picks up another, I don't have the statistic in front of me, but I can grab it real quickly here, I think. I believe it's about another 4,000 homes, 4,000 to 5,000 homes that would be picked up as part of that RDOF initiative. What we're asking for is that the county basically guarantee the debt service replenishment fund. In the event we ever defaulted, it simply is something we've done before that allows us to get very good long-term interest rates, having the backing of the county. In exchange for that, we pay the county an annual fee of 40 basis points or 0.4% on the outstanding balances, which adds up to a significant amount of money for the county. It comes up to something in excess of $1 million, about $1.2 million over the term of the contract. We also provide 24 dark fibers for the county's use for non-competitive purposes, which would be connecting town halls, county facilities, E911. We had a planning meeting recently where we sat down with Jerry and John and several of the county staff and are changing some of the routes a little bit to meet county needs. And again, we encourage that, and I think it will continue to be somewhat dynamic as we proceed and as additional applications for the fiber come about. The process from here forward is what we're looking at is an initial resolution. The process is the same as for general obligation bonding, where there would be a TEFRA hearing. There's an initial resolution and then a 30-day period that allows the public to react to that. There's not a commitment in the initial resolution, although there is some expectation that if there isn't significant pushback, that it likely would move forward in a final resolution following a public hearing. at least 30 days after the initial resolution is passed. We also would be providing tower space to the county at no cost. And I think that that's the program in a nutshell. And I guess with that, I'd open it up for any questions that folks might have.
Let me just expand on some of Steve's comments, and thank you for that overview. Jerry and I, along with representatives from CCIT and the Sheriff's Department, met last Thursday for several hours to go over the proposed lines and looking at how we could grab certain towers and route it to meet or address needs with local governments and schools and other things. And Bug Tussle was very open to making those modifications to get a better product at the end of the day with the fiber line. And it was a very interesting and enlightening process, and one that will serve us long term. And remember that the middle mile fiber is a short-term goal. The long-term goal is to get fiber throughout the county, but this gets adequate service to address the needs of those underserved areas, many of the underserved, not all in the county, going forward. But we are awaiting Quarles and Brady's review.
Yes,
Christie?
and I think there's some questions that they would have for Bug Tussle in regards to the position that we take in lieu of the greater bond issue by La Crosse County. So
Fond du Lac.
Fond du Lac County. So they, I believe, have some questions for Bug Tussle in regards to not only the resolution, our position on the GO notes, and also the guarantee.
So I think, is Kate your attorney, or they can?
Kate is our assistant. Linda Templin is our bond counsel. And is it Rebecca Speckhart from Quarles you're dealing with? Because Rebecca from Quarles actually, I believe, drafted the documents that we're using.
That is
Or
not
Fond du
what,
Lac.
that's not what we understand has happened. She's looking at them at this time. So I think maybe that wouldn't be something we just need to get all cleared up. I think there's a few details that they're still looking for in regards to not only the format of the initial resolution, but also the guarantee that was provided by the U.S. Bank's attorney as well.
So if we can get those issues on the table as soon as possible, so we can get a final, the sooner we can get the final resolution done, the better, because it'll give everybody a chance to look at it and do the appropriate due diligence. So we will have a special meeting next week before the county board meeting. I'd like to have those in place before the informational meeting, and that's critical for the issuance of or to meeting the timeline. So I think, Michael was going to follow up with Quarles today and relay that timeline to them. So we'll try to keep you posted, Steve and Mitch.
Okay. Yeah, we have a call tomorrow morning with Linda Templin, so I will make sure that she reaches out to Rebecca because that's new information to me, so I am not sure.
Do members have any questions about the concept that we are advancing, understanding that the resolution will be specific in nature? I think you've all heard it several times. So I'm seeing everybody nodding in concurrence that they understand it and I think support it. Chair Gibbs?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the committee here is supportive, and at least historically, what we have seen was very supportive of the project. I think the only holdup right now is then our bond counsel to give us the go-ahead and approval with the guarantee and the agreement. So. I don't know that there's anything that this committee is not heard or not seen. It's just a matter of waiting for the other officials to look into it.
With that, we look for that invite for that special meeting, and we'll keep everyone posted. All right, we will then move on to, go ahead.
No, thank you for your time and attention to this. I appreciate it, and we will follow up on that item.
All right. Policy issue discussion and committee determination, nothing. Announcements, we will have the joint meeting on September 20th. September, we will have a special meeting on September 16th. We'll we'll rely on you to figure out where we meet, what room we meet. It might be awkward in here if we're with the full county board. I think 6:30 should we plan for? Does that give us enough time? Rules review should be done by then. We'll make sure that they're done. Or no, rules review is meeting the Tuesday, not Thursday. So 6:30. Anything else? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order. Moved by Gibbs, seconded by Arstead. You kept getting your hand up a little bit slow, so I was gonna. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. We are adjourned.
Yes.
I wanted to make sure you had a meaningful role in the meeting.
Yes. Here in the assembly room, it looks like infrastructure committee is also looking to meet in the assembly room. At the same time.
That's a good call.
I don't go to that, I just got that random invite.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I will double check